As odd as this is to feel the need to say, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a game that actually tries to be Assassin's Creed. And it has a lot of success in doing so, telling a great story, but it's somewhat held back by its gameplay and unpolished state. The game harnesses its positives to make the most of the broken mess that it finds itself in two ways. The game itself is the buggiest Assassin's Creed has been since Unity, with crashes and game-breaking glitches galore. Prior to Valhalla, Assassin's Creed's lore was also a bit of a broken mess. You know what, I genuinely don't know if that's the case anymore. Valhalla makes the most of a sticky situation, and does so wonderfully. It's not a perfect game, but it's the first time in a long time that I've come away from an Assassin's Creed experience feeling satisfied as an Assassin's Creed fan. And so this video shall function as my review for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Please enjoy. Before we begin this video, it is sponsored by the Ridge Wallet. Wallets feel like a necessary evil. They're big, they're lumpy, they're ugly, they bulge in your pants. What if they didn't have to be? The Ridge Wallet is light, sleek, and industrial. It doesn't fold, it doesn't bulge, there's no lumpiness, and yet they serve beautifully as wallets that help keep you organised as well. They carry up to 12 cards and have a clip for cash. And on top of that, they save you a considerable amount of space in your pocket, being only a fraction of the size of your average wallet. There are over 30 different colours and styles, including carbon fibre and burnt titanium, so you can find one to match your style. On the topic of security, the Ridge Wallet is made with RFID blocking technology, which protects you from digital pickpocketers. They're stylish, practical, secure, and they're even robust, so you won't need to replace it. And as a testament to their quality, they've got over 40,000 5-star reviews. With an option like this on the market, why settle for a wallet designed in the 90s? For 10% off, with free worldwide shipping and returns, go over to their site at ridge.com/Fizhy and use the code Fizhy. And with the holiday season breathing down our necks, who knows? Maybe you know somebody who could benefit from a gift like this. You can find a link in the description. And with all that said, now back to the video. Before we properly begin, I'd like to issue a minor spoiler warning. Now, I'm not really going to talk about spoilers, but the footage itself might show some spoilery content, albeit out of context. I may allude to certain points in the plot, but I'll try my best to avoid discussing any major spoilers, and I won't show any footage from major spoilers. So make of that what you will. Let's get going. Valhalla's strongest point by far is its narrative. We play as Eivor, a Norse orphan of the Raven clan who, with their adopted brother Sigurd, travelled to England, in search of a new home after being displaced by King Harald's conquest of Norway. Once in England, the Raven clan needs to find alliances, which comprises a huge portion of the plot. The plot is structured in what feels like natural acts, nothing telling us we're in Act 1, 2 or 3, but a structure that suggests it's in the background. Inside these acts are little sagas, 1 to 2 hour long arcs in different regions that tell the stories of those different areas. All these stories have relevance to the plot of Valhalla, and due to the episodic styling they feel like memory sequences from the old Assassin's Creed games, especially in the major city arcs, which primarily focus on the presence of the Order of Ancients. And these arcs justify themselves beautifully. All these self-contained stories present new characters and new stakes, and every single one of them is well developed. Some arcs are better than others for sure, but I wouldn't say there's any arc in this game that I really didn't like. While these arcs are often isolated stories to that specific area, there's a bit of carryover in characters. A lot of characters you'll meet you may never meet again, but there is a select circle of characters who may carry over between certain arcs. You helped them earlier in the plot, and now they're here to help you, sort of thing. It gives you a sense that building these alliances actually has a purpose. Early on in the narrative, we're introduced to the Hidden Ones, who tell us about the Order of Ancients, some of whom will show up in the plot naturally, and others we have to go out of our way to hunt down. We may find clues in the story, we may find clues in the open world. When we kill members of the Order, we get confession rooms, and it feels so very Assassin's Creed. And as you hunt certain Order members, you may find clues that reveal the identity of another one that you can go and kill, a structure that will eventually lead you to its Grand Master. And at no point in the Viking aspect of the story does it feel as if Assassin's Creed elements are forced in there for the sake of being there. If anything, it feels enhanced by it. The sense of mystery that once made Assassin's Creed so compelling is also represented in Valhalla. The game makes it very clear very quickly that there's something else going on, something that we need to figure out. And the modern day uses this in a way that keeps it relevant not just to the game itself, but all the Assassin's Creed games that came before it. It makes the most of everything that Assassin's Creed has been so far, even the stuff that at the time didn't really seem like they worked. As a result, this game is full of strong fan service that doesn't treat its players like idiots. If you know, you know. The game doesn't have to spell out what it's doing because it all makes sense. It doesn't backpedal on anything, it drives the plot forward by using everything that's happened so far, where once the overarching plot of Assassin's Creed games felt like they were all over the place. Valhalla brings all that together to one point that drives the plot forwards, not backwards, which makes it an excellent culmination of everything that's happened in the franchise up until this point. You could perceive this game in a way as a refocus. The narrative is telling us that it's not fucking about anymore. Well, at least for now. I think it's fair to say that the story is good enough, at least for me, to carry the game where the rest of it doesn't necessarily hold up so great. I wasn't a huge fan of the mythological arcs, for example, when I was in Asgard or Jotunheim. However, the story here kept me interested enough to see it through. Despite there being no obligation to do so, I wanted to fully understand the story I was experiencing. Any game that has optional extras to the story that it makes you want to actually do is doing at least something right. And this game never made me regret doing it. Another example of this is you can find little bits of information on a laptop in the modern day. You never have to look at this, but it's there. Things that can be found on here. It provoked an emotional reaction from me, and I felt really good. It's just so Assassin's Creed to have something thought-provoking and moving out the way for those who seek to find it rather than shoved in your face. Of course, it's good to have those in the plot as well, but if there's more, it encourages that exploration that you want from an open-world game. To summarise it all, it's very clear that Darby McDevitt is back working on Assassin's Creed, and his influence both as a writer and a narrative director shows. He wrote some of the best Assassin's Creed stories that I've experienced, being Revelations and Black Flag, and Valhalla is well and truly up there with them. I do, however, have some issues with the delivery at times. There's a lot of standing around talking non-cut scenes with hand gestures and movements that seem a bit unnatural. I get that they're meant to make it look a little bit more authentic, but the end result is it's just a bit more contrived. On top of that, sometimes voices in dialogue feel a little bit disembodied. The best example I can give for this is a character who you meet in one of the very early arcs of the game, named Chaelbert. There's a point where you're riding with Sigurd, Chaelbert, and a few other characters from this arc, and Chaelbert speaks like male Ciri. In other scenes, Chaelbert comes across as inexperienced yet curious, and I do quite like the character. But I couldn't shake that this interaction felt a bit odd. And this happens quite a bit with other characters as well, where there'll be a dialogue interaction where their voice just sounds disembodied. Despite this, Valhalla still sports an excellent cast of characters, all of whom are compelling in their own ways. I want to get to know my allies, and I feel an urge to kill the antagonists. When it comes to Eivor, they're a much stronger protagonist than that of, say, Cassandra or Alexios from Odyssey. Eivor is a set character, and we can make decisions in dialogue that will only reflect that character. Often, dialogue decisions won't go down different routes, but rather different conversational routes that still fit within the narrative. So there's no more inconsistent emotional choices, but rather just choices that make sense for Eivor. This gives room for actual concise character development, which, to be honest, I didn't feel was the most compelling thing about the plot, but it was there. A lot of decisions you make have a minor impact on the immediate outcome, but some may have a more long-term impact. And there are also decisions that may not seem like they matter at first, but then matter much later on, giving you slight variance in the ending, for example. I won't go into what those choices are or how they impact the ending, but that ending remains mostly the same, because the game respectably is trying to tell its own story rather than have us change what's going on. This functions quite well in this type of game as a substitute for flat-out choices because the narrative has a concise direction. And on top of all this, that narrative felt relevant to Assassin's Creed. I could talk about how much I enjoyed the story of Assassin's Creed Valhalla all day, but frankly it wouldn't make for a very good review. There are other aspects to this game that I really do need to talk about. Firstly, when it comes to the gameplay, you've probably already noticed that Assassin's Creed Valhalla's engine is more or less the same as it has been in Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey, barring the fact that you have to toggle run now, and there are a few other variables such as stamina that affects your sprint and how much dodging you can do in a fight and stuff like that. And so playing the game felt instantly outdated in the sense that it didn't feel like I was experiencing anything new as far as the challenge was concerned. It just felt same old Assassin's Creed RPG, which was a little bit disappointing because I feel as if this gameplay ran stale in Origins, let alone Odyssey. I'll give the combat some credit. It is nicer to play than it is to actually watch, though I don't think that really says too much. When you can slow it down in a one-on-one scenario, it's actually quite satisfying. However, it quickly becomes something of a clusterfuck when you're faced with more than one enemy. Yes, it's visceral and some of the kill animations are quite nice to look at, but the novelty of that quickly evaporates when you're left with the rest of it, which is just an utter mess. Again, another positive is most enemies are not damage sponges and only really take a few hits to dispatch, making it in general much better balanced than, say, Odyssey's, but there are some enemies that just take the piss. For example, there's one boss fight in particular that just took far too long, having you aim at really small weak spots, otherwise you wouldn't do any damage whatsoever, and even when you hit those weak spots, the damage you did was so meager that it actually took me about 15 minutes to finish the fight. This fight wasn't particularly challenging if we're not counting in the mental factor, it was just long and tedious. I get why the fight had to exist and I'm not against that, but I wish it was less damage spongy and more actually challenging. Maybe I'm not the kind of player that enjoys massive boss fights, I'm aware that I'm not really, especially not in a franchise that I thought would never have them. But running around a big open space while avoiding vague attacks that you can easily avoid and chipping away at an enemy's health bar really slowly just doesn't strike me as fun. So I guess I'm fortunate in the sense that this is not a common issue with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, as I can only really think of a handful of times where this was the case. That being said, on the boss fights front, I did quite enjoy the Zealot fights. You can find these guys roaming around England and you have to be tactical in every single way to defeat them. You have to choose the spot in which you're going to attack them so that more enemies don't show up and make your life even harder. And though they may seem like damage sponges at first, you can use well-timed parries, dodges and abilities in order to defeat them quite efficiently. On top of this, if you're stocked up on rations and arrows, then you have even more tools that you can use to make your life easier. These fights are well balanced and the enemies offer a variety of challenge in themselves, considering they don't all have the same gear or the same skills. And on top of this, they may attack in different patterns. My biggest gripe with the Zealot fights is you can't assassinate them. Now, I understand that this is designed as a boss fight. This is how they want you to play this, but this is Assassin's Creed as well. Stealth should be viable in almost everything you do, especially when it comes to stuff you can do in the open world. Some players may want the fight, others may want to assassinate them and move on with it. The Zealots should offer this kind of player agency because if you walk up behind them, there's no reason why you can't stab them in the throat. Back to the combat in general, I will say that it is good that there's more to it than just the hack and slash nature of Odyssey. You can fall back on your bow and shoot weak spots on enemies that stun them, then you can go in quite quickly stun kill them, or stun kill them with your bow, and in doing so feel satisfied that you've saved yourself quite a huge chunk of a fight rather than just be chipping away at an enemy's health bar to the point where the combat feels like a chore no matter what you do. Furthermore, the environments are better built for the combat. Conveniently placed explosive pots and cargo on cranes are not uncommon, and it makes your life a lot easier if you spot them and use them. The environments also find themselves being better structured for more stealth if that's what you wish to do instead. In the settings, you can enable instant kill assassinations, meaning that beforehand, if you use your hidden blade, it might chip away at an enemy's health, but with the setting you can have a more traditional Assassin's Creed stealth experience, knowing that every time you use the hidden blade on an enemy, that enemy will die, making the game more flexible when it comes to stealth gameplay. I don't think this extends to using the hidden blade as an offhand weapon in combat, though to be honest I didn't actually try that because it was just really inefficient. Social stealth is also back, allowing you to blend with certain crowds in densely populated areas, use benches and other things to hide, and evade detection by interacting with the environment, being one with the crowd, something similar to the old Assassin's Creed games. Its use is a bit more limited in effect, and the story doesn't utilise that as a viable option as much as I would like. I mean, it can be useful quite often, but I'm talking about the extent of its use. But I'm beyond chuffed that it's back, considering I missed it in Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey. Once you couple this with the other stealth systems, you've got quite a handy stealth mechanic. When it comes to the parkour, I don't really have much to say. It's not like the old Assassin's Creed games where the mechanic was fun in itself. You don't find yourself firing up Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey or Valhalla just to climb about, really. It's more of just a means to an end, and it's a bit of a shame, a missed opportunity maybe, but the game does build its world better to account for it, and that's something. The grindy leveling system of Origins and Odyssey is gone in favour of a power rating system. You get skill points quite quickly, which you can then invest in skills, which when invested contribute to your overall power rating. It's a poor disguise for the level gating you'll find between regions, but if you switch the difficulty to easy, this isn't really an issue. As you progress through the story, you will find the skill points that you need to go on to the next space in good time, so the system is far less grindy than Odyssey was, but I guess the biggest issue that comes up instead of that is the skill tree graph thing is a massive mess. The best word I could use to describe this skill tree is disorganized. I couldn't even tell you what the red, blue and yellow segments actually mean. I have a rough idea that red means combat, blue means stealth, and yellow means health related things. Barring the big skills, the little skills you unlock on the way to progress towards them seem seldom relevant to what you're trying to achieve in this certain part of the graph. Sure, there is some variation when things are blatantly not relevant, but you'll often find yourself investing in small perks that you'll never need just to get to a perk that you do. Say for example you've got Instant Assassinate on, you may still find yourself investing in stealth and assassination damage just to get to a perk that you want. But on a positive flip side, progression is never stagnant. The constant sense of accomplishment in earning these skill points really irons out any sense of tedium. And in the long run, these small perks do actually add up to some very useful benefits. On the other hand, the gear system is much better organised. We're no longer littered with a mound of gear that we'll never use. Instead, we find specific sets in the world and there never seem to be any duplicates. There are benefits for wearing a full set of matching gear, and upgrading stuff doesn't require a ridiculous amount of materials that you could just as easily use to build a full-on skyscraper. What I'm saying is that the stat system in this game isn't ridiculously steeped to the point where the game's literally numerical hell. It's better organised, easier on the eyes to read, and doesn't make it so the gear system is in the forefront of your mind whenever you level up. You can find plenty of materials in the world quite easily, and you don't need absolutely tons of it, and so the system finds itself being nicely balanced. When it comes to the open world, Assassin's Creed Valhalla has plenty to boast about. Yes, it's a big open world, but most importantly there's plenty to do to fill it. Firstly, the narrative takes you to every single region, so you never look at a region and go, why on earth would I go there, the game doesn't want me to. In exploring these regions, you will find plenty of side content to enjoy, and you'll find the vast majority while you're just playing the story. This doesn't break down the flow like going off and grinding in side content, as there's plenty of opportunities for you to go off and do this stuff in passing. Side content is much more diverse than it was in Odyssey, which had you raid and loot camps and caves, or do quote-unquote side quests that made you loot camps and caves. Valhalla has plenty to offer. Gold markers typically mean loot and gear, white markers typically mean other stuff of interest, and blue markers mean mysteries, which could be puzzles, caves, tombs, or world events, which are this game's substitute for side quests. Typically smaller stories that don't take up too much time, you can find these world events as you're doing the main story quite often. You'll probably find yourself doing a nice amount without ever having to deviate from where the game's story takes you. Some may be dialogue encounters and some may require you to do stuff. What you'll have to do depends entirely on the encounter itself. Typically you'll have to think outside of the box as you're not given an objective to follow. It's a nice break from doing the quest structure as a part of the main content, as this engages your brain. You have to think, what are we supposed to do? It's a nice way to separate the main content from the side content by having quests and the quest log be used only for the main content to avoid any clogging up of that quest log that might then somehow mentally manipulate you into doing side content that you wouldn't ordinarily do, and souring the experience because you have to. These world events find themselves fitting nicer as they're easier to ignore, and also don't disrupt the flow and pacing of the main story that's unfolding. Nor does it take away too much focus, which, in a game with a main story that's going to take you about 60 hours to finish, would be something of a bullet in the foot. These world events could entail vastly different things. One might be quite serious or quite sad, and others might be quite silly. For example, in England you can find a little girl sat under a tree, stating that when the final leaf falls, it means her father is no longer coming home. You can shoot this leaf down to let the child know that her father is probably gone. Apologies, I don't think I have the footage. And then there's the silly alternative, which is a couple who are sexually aroused by you burning their house down. Yeah.
What did it? I am as hard as Heimdall's tower!
A lot of the silly ones are actually funny and some are just purely ridiculous, but at least this isn't shoved in your face in a side quest that's pretending to be more than it actually is. Regardless, the world events present little stories that don't disrupt the flow of your playthrough. And this better organisation of side content isn't the only thing this open world has to boast about. Provided you ignore some of the character model faces, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a beautiful game. From woodlands to cities to mountains, there's plenty of visual diversity in this world. As a result, you can easier identify whereabouts in the world you are. You know if you're in the city of Jorvik or London or Winchester, or if you're in Mercia, East Anglia, Wessex or Northumbria. And that extends to other areas as well. You know if you're in Norway or Vinland or Asgard or Jotunheim, because they all have a unique look about them. And with all the world events, mysteries and other things you can find, including assassin bureaus, which by the way are awesome, Assassin's Creed Valhalla gives you plenty to digest without overwhelming you with some psychological obligation, and as a result the open world is much better for it. Granted, it's still something of a completionist nightmare, but I genuinely believe this game justifies its size. And on that front, you'll certainly get your money's worth on hours you'll sink into the game. Does that mean you'll want to do everything the open world has to offer? Absolutely not. I don't think there's a game out there I could ever justify 100%ing. There's always going to be something, no matter how good it is, that I simply don't feel like I'll enjoy. But I at least got enjoyment out of what I did decide to experience in the open world, and that's something. Another thing I'd like to talk about before we get on to some of my more pressing critiques would be the absolutely glorious soundtrack. Jesper Kyd, Sarah Schachner and Einar Selvik absolutely smashed this one out of the park. I cannot fault this game's soundtrack. It sounds great for a Viking game, but it also sounds brilliant for an Assassin's Creed game, delivering those Assassin's Creed vibes where they're needed. You've probably been hearing the soundtrack play in the background of this video, and you're welcome. Now let's talk about where Assassin's Creed Valhalla needs some serious work. If you've played the game, you're probably well aware of this issue. It's pretty buggy. I couldn't put a number to the amount of bugs and crashes I experienced while playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla because they're just so high that I stopped counting. I think it's fair to say that the game needed more time than it perhaps got. I'm certain the developers worked their asses off to try to get it to an acceptable state, but I think the end result that came out on the 10th of November was somewhat undercooked, and could have done with a further 6 or 9 months in the oven to make sure the experience was rather ironclad. AAA games these days are massive, you're always going to have bugs and glitches, but I think it's fair to say that Assassin's Creed Valhalla simply has too many issues on this front. For the people who naturally come in whenever you bring up the subject of bugs and go, I didn't have any bugs, this game isn't buggy at all. I made sure to include plenty of examples of blunders that I experienced in my playthrough. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the glitchiest Assassin's Creed since Unity. I played the game on both PC and PS5, and on both, the glitches were rife. At the best of times, they were immersion breaking, but at their worst, they were outright game breaking. I don't mind if the bug isn't really interfering with the experience, but the moment I have to reload a save and redo stuff just to fix it, I get a little bit annoyed. And that is something I found myself having to do a couple of times. Don't get me wrong, harmless little funny bugs are funny, and I love experiencing them because they're a really good laugh, and games are about fun. Doesn't mean it has to be exclusively the fun that was intended. But is this the best that could have been done here? Furthermore, the game is prone to crashing. Now, it doesn't do this as much now there's a patch out, but it's still worth talking about as it affected my experience. It crashed a lot. Once or twice I can overlook, but this was at least a couple dozen. It's a damn good job that Assassin's Creed Valhalla has plenty of redeemable features, but the polish certainly isn't one of them. Sure, you can fix it with patches, but the first impression is made. The developers poured obvious passion into this game, but I feel like the higher-ups in the company forced a deadline that was just not realistic. All for the sake of being a launch title for the Xbox Series X. When it comes to performance on PC and PS5, I didn't have too many issues in this front besides from some strange conflict with Streamlabs while streaming it that caused a frame drop in the output, but not while I was playing the game. And though that was weird, if you're not going to be streaming, that's not really an issue. But I hear other PC players had similar experiences there, and on PS5 the performance issues I had were the occasional frame drop, but beyond that it wasn't anything too major. But I'm hearing that there are some people who are having performance issues there as well. I haven't really looked into how other people have been faring on the PS5 really, everything I've seen has been fine, so I can't really confirm the validity of them. But it's just something that I've heard, but I haven't really experienced myself. However, other people that I know have been experiencing similar issues to me. Lots and lots of bugs, crashes, and frankly, I think this game deserves better. And honestly, so do the people who clearly put their backs into making this game. Now, let's spare a moment to discuss the microtransactions. Yes, apparently single-player games need microtransactions. Look at all these snazzy packs you can buy.
Ubisoft!
Firstly, who would want this and who would want to pay more real money to have it? It's funny, but it doesn't enhance the experience, it just sticks it in self-destruct. I don't have an issue with what's being sold on this Helix store, and I also don't have an issue with people who will happily pay to buy things on the Helix store. I'm quite reckless with my own money. Sometimes you just have to buy a jungle Skarg, a Diplodocus costume, and a satanic Bible. The issue I have is with the store itself and how it presents what it's offering. There are a couple of gear packs on here that cost 2,000 Helix credits. Now, you can't buy 2,000 Helix credits straight from the Helix store. You can buy a pack of 2,300 for £16.99, which is probably roughly $20. That's a lot of money for a gear pack. There is a pack priced at $1,500, but you still have to pay £16.99 because there's no option to simply buy $1,500. You have to buy the 2,300 bundle. And while you can put those Helix credits into something else, you still have to pay for more than you need. So while the 1,500 Helix credits gear pack and the 2,000 Helix credits gear pack are technically worth different values in the in-game store, the real-life financial value is the same, 2,300 Helix credits or £16.99. You might not have to fork out so much in Helix credits to go towards the next purchase if that's what you want to do, but that is such a shitty business model that wouldn't fly anywhere else. Right, okay, let's set up a scenario here. Say you're in a shop and you want to check out one item. You go up to pay and the person behind the till goes, well, this item's worth this much, but you need to pay more, but we'll knock that money off your next purchase. Even then, you may still need to pay more. But you're like, fuck off, I don't want anything else. You're told that this is the only way that you're walking out of the shop with the item. In that scenario, you'll be outraged and take your business elsewhere. You could argue, but the pack's worth 2,000 Helix credits and has a 300 Helix credits bonus. No, it doesn't. It's just worth 2,300 Helix credits. That bonus is there to manipulate you into thinking you're getting a good deal. You're not. It even has the gall to put up a 6,600 Helix credits bundle and say best value. There isn't a good value on here. If you buy that big 6,600 Helix credits bundle, you're forking out a huge percentage of the game's shelf value again, with which you can buy the small gear packs, or you can just buy the 3 big ones. Is that really worth it? That $20 you're considering putting towards a 2,000 Helix credits gear pack, you know what else that can buy? The entirety of The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. You could get the Game of the Year edition of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt right now, and still have spent less than you'd spend to buy the best value Helix credits bundle. I get your counter arguments. If you're not happy, don't buy anything from here, and you're right, we can choose to ignore it, but you've got to call this kind of stuff out before some greedy goblin goes, right, what else can I pull? This is hardly a Ubisoft exclusive issue, and I'm quite certain a lot of people working on this game didn't want this store to exist at all. So many games have in-game stores, and it's nothing new for Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey had in-game stores. In Unity you could buy in-game gear with real money as well, and the practice has been, at least since Origins, you buy the bundles which will contain more Helix credits than you need, so you're actually paying more than the value of what you want to buy. So the end result is a lot of players likely have leftover Helix credits that they didn't want to spend on anything else. So I ran a test to see if Helix credits carried over from Assassin's Creed Origins to Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I would have done Odyssey, but that requires reinstalling the game, and that's something that I'll never do. It's all Ubisoft run, right? I shouldn't imagine there being an issue here, but I'll save you the suspense, they don't carry over. I'm not saying that they have to, I'm just saying it would have been a nice gesture if they did. Would have been a bit more, consumer friendly. The Helix store is hardly the worst offender for insulting microtransactions in gaming, but that doesn't really excuse it. I will give a positive here, at least there's no XP boost time saver this time around. Why? Because Valhalla isn't grindy to the point where your experience is held to ransom, but they still offer resources and map pack time savers, so people pay extra if they don't wish to explore, or you can pay real money to get a silver pack, or resource packs. Okay, cool. That's there, that exists. I don't mind that it's there, but it's very telling about your confidence in this game, isn't it? If you're going to sell people the means to not explore it. It's purely cosmetic, and I can safely say there's nothing on there that I feel is taking away from the experience outside of the store. But I can't sit here and pretend to understand why it needed to exist at all. But whatever, I guess it's not my problem. Ultimately, Assassin's Creed Valhalla tells a really good Assassin's Creed story, making the most of the shambolic state of the lore after Odyssey and turning it into a good narrative that drives an overarching plot forward. Experiencing the main characters, the open world, the modern day, and all the other glorious surprises, it was satisfying to play as an Assassin's Creed fan despite the gameplay feeling instantly outdated, and the game's worst enemy turns out to be its own optimization and polish. I can't pretend to understand why anyone felt like microtransactions were necessary in a single-player game, let alone a game that people pay full AAA price for, but I can appreciate the love and care that went into making this game, even if I still doubt that care extends to the higher-ups within Ubisoft. This game makes the most of a broken mess in two different ways. Firstly, the game, when it comes to glitches and bugs, is in something of a state, and yet when I got to the end of the story I felt like suffering through that was worth it. And the second way is through the Assassin's Creed franchise and its lore being an utter mess after Odyssey. Valhalla manages to tie all those loose ends up, keep it relevant to its own plot, double down on where the franchise has gone wrong, and turn it into something good. Is Valhalla a return to form for Assassin's Creed? I can't say that it is, it all depends on what comes next. But in itself, for what it does for Assassin's Creed individually, I have a lot of appreciation for this game, but I think it's time that Assassin's Creed is revised again as a gaming experience and rebuilt into something new from the ground up. I shan't be slapping a number rating on this review because those number ratings have no meaning to me. What does this number out of 10 mean? The criteria is so skewed and it just honestly makes no sense. But whether or not I can recommend this game, it depends entirely on what you're after. Did you like Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey? If so, there's no real reason why you should dislike this. Do you want an Assassin's Creed game? Yes, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is an Assassin's Creed game, and dare I say, a good one, at least from a narrative perspective. Are you expecting the best game ever? Probably not going to be the game for you. Or if glitches and crashes really get on your nerves, you'd probably find yourself best waiting. But if you find your gaming taste to be similar to mine, then you can't really go too far wrong with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There's a lot to like, and the writing in this has masterfully managed to make at least some sense of the Assassin's Creed franchise and its overarching plot. And what happens next is anybody's guess, but I'm a little bit more optimistic that it could be good, so fingers crossed. And that concludes this review, so thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff, that would be fantastic. And now I leave you with an edit that I made because I had far too much time on my hands. So take care, I'll see you soon, and please enjoy.
How long have you been chasing me, Wolf-Kissed? 17 winters? 18? Do I now haunt your dreams? Do I warm your loins?
I wish I understood you better. For those I do not understand, I do not trust. And if you stay in Norway, both you and your brother must serve under me.
We are not the heel-trodden subjects of a boy king. We cannot stay in Norway, so we push forward to newer lands.
Eivor, Sigurd, I give you England and its 4 kingdoms. Mercia, East Anglia, Northumbria, and Wessex.
These conquests have given you a home, but there is more to this land, Eivor. A darkness unseen, an unknowable threat. One bound to England's destiny, and to yours.
These excellent men were my shepherds. They are a clan, not joined by blood, but by a common idea. A brotherhood of shadows executing their own form of justice. In my time with them, they shared many of their most hidden secrets. And now, I gift these secrets to you. Throw in with these wastrels? These arrogant swine? For what? A scrap of land and a promise of peace?
Does Eivor bow to kings? We'll be watching your back.
We do not dash ourselves against hopeless courses. We arrive unexpected. Strike swift.
I know who I am. I know my destiny. and you will not hinder me!
The gods favor you, Eivor. You will have your glory, and you will earn your place in Valhalla. But these portals carry a darker truth. You will betray your brother.
My city is not a battlefield.
Not yet, Great King, but the day will come.